Yeah, woo! Is anybody else, is this their first time? Woo, woo, first timers, woo! Okay. All right, let's get started. So I'm Bree Mosley, but contrary to what the schedule says, I am not actually a historian. That would be Christine Freeman, who you probably were expecting to see. She's usually here representing the archives. Sadly, she couldn't make it this year, so you're stuck with me. But I am actually an exhibitions curator and designer for Pixar Animation Studios. I'm also a big Disney dork. Here I am dressed as a Musketeer at the Pixar Halloween celebration some years ago. I've been at Pixar for a pretty long time now. We're actually 6 days away from my 14th anniversary at Pixar. Here's a photo that they took of me on my orientation day. It's looking so fresh, so innocent. Look at that sweet little face. So I'm going to assume that this crowd is pretty familiar with the fact that Pixar Animation Studios has an archive, right? Yeah. Here's a shot of our lovely archive facility at the campus in Emeryville. This is, of course, where we gather, organize, preserve, and make available materials that help Pixar employees make movies, and materials that help tell the story of Pixar, its people, and its productions. We currently have about somewhere around 10 million items in the collection, individual objects. I'm also going to assume that you are pretty familiar with the kinds of objects that we keep in there, right? Things like physical, visual, and story development artwork, so like drawings, paintings, sculptures, items and images that are used as visual development reference, scripts and sheet music, consumer products and ephemera, corporate records, and pretty much anything else that helps us in our mission, which is right here, our very official mission statement, to support movie making and preserve the creative heritage of the company. As a curator, I spend a lot of my time digging deep into these archives to bring you guys the very best of our collection through things like museums. We have touring exhibitions that go all over the world. This is one that was in Madrid, and this was a collaboration we did with the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum. Disney parks and cruise ships, airports even. This is the SFO Museum. And even the Pixar campus, if you are ever lucky enough to visit us. We have gallery spaces where we display artwork for our older and upcoming films. So I help curate and design those gallery spaces. So when we do have visitors at the studio, they can get a glimpse behind the scenes of what we're working on. So this is supposed to be a presentation about the 30 years of Toy Story films. So I'm going to use Toy Story to elaborate a little bit on that mission statement and hopefully show you guys some really cool stuff from our collection that you haven't seen before. Maybe some things you have seen, but there's also some exciting new stuff in there. Does anybody know what this is? Right? Familiar? Does this look familiar? So this is, these are individual extra figures from 3D printed aliens that go to the very beloved Zoetrope, which used to be in California Adventure. There's actually a version on loan to the Academy Museum right now, so you will be able to see that there eventually in Los Angeles. Okay, so I would like to start by taking a step back in time and diving into our historical photo collection all the way back to the mythical years of the 1990s, leading up to the release of the Toy Story film. So here's, just to start us off, a few photos that were taken at the Point Richmond office, where Pixar was located during Toy Story's production, before moving to our current location in Emeryville, which happened after Toy Story 2 came out. An important thing to note is that we did not have any kind of official archive until we moved to Emeryville in the year 2000, and not even an unofficial archive until after A Bug's Life production wrapped. So Thankfully, these folks were all really enthusiastic about what we're doing and felt the artwork is worth saving, so we have stuff to show you from Toy Story. Here we are out in front of the Point Richmond office. It's just some young coworkers yucking it up, maybe on their way to lunch or something. But we have, this is artists Tia Cratter and Bill Cohn. Somebody behind Bill Cohn, I don't know who that is, they're hiding. This is Heidi Stetner, who was managing the animation and modeling systems. Character designer Bob Polly, and technical director Eben Ostby. And here's just like a typical, we're having a meeting in our office looking at our gigantic computer screen. Pretty messy. Artists tend to be that messy, and Bob's office is still very messy. He's out there giving away his secrets. And here's Bill and Tia just looking over some plans. But while I was pulling all of these images and trying to decide what to show you guys, I kept getting a little bit distracted by what they were looking at or what they were drawing or what was pinned to the boards behind them. And I wanted to know, what are they working on? And do we have it in the collection? So the archivists and I did a little digging to see if we could find what they were looking on and if we still had the originals. So let's take a look at what they're looking at. Enhance. Ooh, what's that? Aha! It is an exterior plan of the Pizza Planet building structure. So, it's pretty simplistic, but I think it's really elegant. So this is going to be part of a model packet so that the digital modelers could build the structure in the computer. So you've got everything you need. Measurements, you got your scale, 1/160th. And this is what it looks like in the final film. So, pretty faithful. But I always thought it was kind of odd. There's no way that you could fit the actual interior scene in what we're looking at, which is pretty common. You want it to look nice from the outside, but you sort of need to stretch it once you're in there. It's like, it's like the TARDIS or whatever. Okay, so here we have Bill again, and he has got a lot of fun stuff pinned to his board back there, but I am mostly interested in enhance. Nope, not that bucket of pencils, but this original Pizza Putt logo before it was changed to Pizza Planet. And it turns out that a lot of the photos that you're seeing here were taken Disney had come around to take some photos for a press packet to help promote the film, so it was pretty late in the production. So a lot of stuff was already designed, but there happened to be this kind of late change to the story that changed Pizza Putt to Pizza Planet. So that's why a lot of the artwork that you're going to see is from that scene. It just happened to be what they were working on when the Disney folks came through to take their pictures. So it really is like a narrow slice in time of what the artists were working on. So the wildest thing about this change is that there were no aliens in the film before this change was made. It came out of a brainstorming session. Somebody did a gag. Oh, look, aliens would be fun, and it fit in. So it became a huge part of the story. And I think it's really wild to think about Toy Story without the aliens. They're essential. Okay, so here we have Bill Cohn again, and he's got some kind of exciting looking schematic up there in the corner. So let's take a look. Zoom. This is a drawing of the mission control game in Pizza Planet. Again, we're a lot of Pizza Planet stuff going on here. There are some details that are on this drawing that are a little bit different from the one that was zoomed in, and we think that is actually because he was in the middle of working on it, so we weren't seeing a finished version in the photograph, but this is the version that we pulled from the archives. So I think it's really cool to see that process. There's, visual representation of that process there. But while we were looking for this one, we also found this really cool model packet. I talked about what model packets were for. You know, it's basically a blueprint for how to build this. And so this really has all the details that you want to see, and it's got a director approval stamp and measurements, notes about some textures and whatnot. And yeah, it only shows up in the film for like, I don't know, 2 seconds. It's like in the background behind Sid. It's like there's one pan, but I just think it's a really nice example of how much detail goes into every single thing, even if it's only gonna be up on screen for half a second. Like, it's important that they get everything right. They have to build it all. It's not free. It's not, you can't just go into a set warehouse and pull things in when you want to. You have to create it all out of whole cloth. Okay, so here we've got Bob again, and he's actually working on revising the Pizza Planet logo up there at the top, but I am more interested, can you even see that? Yeah. I'm more interested in this Buzz Lightyear drawing. What is that? So this is actually the design for Andy's bedspread when he goes like full-on Buzz obsession and his room fills up with like Buzz Lightyear posters, and you know, he's got his sheet set and everything. This is the design for that, which you can see here with a very startled looking Woody. Oh no, what is happening? And these are some other progressions. So this is like an earlier little thumbnail progression drawing that goes, and then this is a more final version that they probably would have used to base the actual design on the bedspread from. Am I going too fast for you guys? Do you want to? Okay, great. Okay, so here's Tia Cratter again, and she's got all kinds of stuff going on in here. She is painting what looks like an interior scene, probably Andy's room. And she is actually using up here, this is a pastel by Ralph Eggleston, and she's using that as a reference. He did his pastels sort of more based on color and lighting and mood, and then she would often paint scenes that were a little bit more detailed. So she's using his pastel as a reference for the color and the lighting to paint her version. And unfortunately, we could not locate these. That happens. Our archive is not processed down to the item level because we have, like I said, 10 million, or almost 10 million items in our collection. We have a really small team, so we tend to process things as requests come in for exhibitions or for reference. And so we just know, like, sort of generally what's in a box or what's in a folder, but we don't have down to every item. So sometimes it does take a little extra digging to find things. Doesn't necessarily mean we don't have it. It just isn't found yet. But we do have this painting back here. She would probably hate it if she knew I was zooming in this close to her face, but I think she's adorable. So, this painting of Andy and Sid's house exterior. So this would have been an acrylic painting by Tia. And speaking of Ralph Eggleston, here is a few photos of him in his workspace. Ralph was, of course, a production designer on many of our films. He wrote and directed the short film For the Birds. He's got tons of art everywhere in these photos. He was very prolific. I especially like the photo that includes the calendar because, you know, us archivists like to know when things happened and what date photos were taken. But that only works if he actually peeled the pages off of the calendar, and it doesn't look like this is a very used calendar, well-used calendar, so for all we know, it could be months later and he was just lazy and didn't pull the sheet off. But it gets us in the ballpark. We know it's somewhere late 1993, maybe early 1994. But I digress. Oh, and we do not have that calendar in the collection, sorry to say. But we do have all of these other lovely pastels, especially like the color scripts, which we really love to show off. So you've probably seen these in books and exhibitions before, but they're just so lovely, and yeah, I love them. But a little more rare is some of my favorites, like these, which are, he's just sort of obsessively drawing the same detail under different lighting conditions, like this set of stair banisters from Andy's house. And I just think these are so lovely and subtle, and he's really just trying to work out what the atmosphere is like. And you know, you'd never really know these were from Toy Story, but there's so many of these, like this beautiful little drawing. It's just a sliver of light passing through a cracked door, and then, I don't know, they're some of my favorites of his. Even though they don't have as much pizzazz, they don't have characters, they're just as important to the production design of the film. And unfortunately, we lost Ralph in 2022, and you know, he really did have an undeniable impact on our films and our culture around the studio, so he's very much missed, and I'm glad we have a lot of art to remember him by. Okay, so here we have Galen Sussman. She's doing like a rudimentary 3D scan. This is a pretty popular photo. You may have seen it before, but I wanted to include it because it kind of gives a peek into the technical side. So the grid, these are sculpted, sorry, go back. So the grid was drawn on the outside, and then she's using a digitizing wand to plot points, which translated the data point into the computer. Sorry, I'm not a technical person, can you tell? I'm like trying to get through this. I'm like points, plots, computers. But this helped create the basic shapes of the 3D model. This is not how we do things anymore, but this was, you know, really early in the days of computer animation. So they were really trying to figure out what the best process is. And we do have all of these sculptures still. So like most of the maquettes that you see around, they're kind of the gray ones. Those are initially sculpted out of an oil-based modeling clay, and then we cast them in resin and paint them gray just for durability, because they do get passed around the studio as a reference item. But these ones, for some reason, they made them out of polymer clay. It's like super sculpey, you know, like the stuff that, like, it's like a hobby clay that you use to make beads and stuff, and you bake it in the oven. But these things are huge. They're like this big. So I imagine that they took forever to harden. They actually did have to bake these. I think they went in somebody's oven, like home oven. And they do get a little brittle with age, so we don't get to show these outside of the studio much. But you know, they're in fairly decent shape for the material and how old they are, in spite of how Buzz is looking in this photo. It's like a little rough. Okay, we also have the digitizing wand. Ooh, yay. Okay, so here is Pete Docter, and he is using his own face as animation reference for Woody, because animators are actors, of course. So they often keep mirrors by their desks so they can act out a scene themselves and use their faces as reference. There's no zooming required here, but I'm going to do it anyway. Enhance. Because we have the mirror. Woo! Wow. The back of this is a hand-drawn high-tech Toon logos, which was the internal production company name that we used during Toy Story's development. And this is a piece of stationery with the official High-Tech Toons logo on it. So this would have been used to like write out somebody's meetings for the day or take notes, like a little notepad. So I thought that was a fun exercise to learn a little bit more about what folks were working on in these photos and show you some, you know, production-related items from our collection. But of course, the archives collects things that are also not production-related, and just because the film is finished does not mean there are more fun items to collect. So I would like you to fast forward in your mind to the fall of 1995. You are invited to the Toy Story premiere at the El Capitan Theater in Hollywood, California. Here is a letter you would have received in the mail, and your super cool invitation. That center part actually rotates to reveal details about the premiere, so date, time, whatever, all the kind of stuff that you need to know. And here is the front of the building as it appeared at the premiere. And Disney really went all out for this screening, you could tell. Because it was also a multi-level Toy Story themed attraction with all kinds of themed play areas, live performances, a Pizza Planet cafe, and much of this was actually duplicated in a temporary attraction at Disneyland's Tomorrowland for just a few months in 1996. And it was actually in the space that is now Alien Pizza Planet. Did anybody go to this? Yay, all right, so you know it. Good. Because I don't have any video of the inside, so you're gonna, hopefully somebody, I think there's some on YouTube, so you guys can look it up later. I'm very sorry I have nothing of the inside, but it's out there, so you've gotta look it up. But here's some footage of the outside. There's this very concerned looking Bo Peep up here. Oh, everything's a little off model. Buzz's hands are kind of small. This was the early days, you know, we didn't know. This is my absolute favorite part is this like very off model hand painted Woody with like very intense side eye, like so judgmental. Okay, so here you are, you're rolling up there in your silver Acura, and you see all these people, and you're like, oh no, where am I gonna park? But then you remember you have your preferred parking pass with a neat little map on the back. And so this would have came in your packet with your letter and your invitation. Like, great, only you have to park a couple blocks away, you're good to go. And so, here's your ticket. With your ticket in hand, you start lining up, and you see some familiar faces because everybody there, all the voice talent is there. There's Tom Hanks and Tim Allen. There's Don Rickles. Whoa, it's Jim Varney. Everybody's there. So cool. You've even got your VIP popcorn ticket for your free popcorn. They didn't brand this one though. I mean, come on, guys. That's it. That's all you got. So you see the movie and you visit the funhouse and you think, well, gee, that was great. And sadly, I don't have any footage of the funhouse for you, but like I said, go on YouTube. There's lots there of this funhouse and the Toy Story version, and the Disneyland version, which were basically identical, but it's a lot of, you know, performances, live performances, like people interacting with guests. So I thought another thing that's really interesting about this is that I noticed none of this signage says Pixar, like none of the ephemera, none of the signage does not say Pixar on it at all, because we didn't really exist yet as a recognizable brand. So Disney was our distributor at the time, and they were responsible for all of this premiere and the marketing and everything. And, you know, I don't think that they thought putting Pixar on anything was going to do anything. Nobody knew what it was, so it's just Disney presents Toy Story. But yeah, even the film poster doesn't say it on it. No Pixar, it's not there. But of course, it was a huge hit, and you better believe that Pixar was on every single poster after that. And then we have the shorts, and I don't think that it can be understated what a huge impact that this film had on the animation industry. Like, computer animation is now the standard, and it all started with Pixar and Toy Story. So, of course, Archives isn't just here to collect archives from past films. We also play a super important role in providing reference materials to current productions. And in the case of Toy Story 2, 3, and 4, they needed to build on existing design language from the first film to make sure that the following films were visually cohesive. So looking back at past concept art is really an important part of the filmmaking process, and the Archives plays a huge role in that. So of course you have to start somewhere, so I'm going to start by just looking at some early concepts of our friends from the first film so that we can move on to the others, like Woody. Here are some early concepts of Woody when he still has his ventriloquist dummy mouth. And you may have seen some drawings similar to these, but Some of these actually were just scanned, and so they have never been seen outside of the studio before. But they're just like stacks and stacks. When the artists go through, they're just drawing hundreds of these in every different version they can possibly muster, because it's full exploration mode, and they want as many options as they can to move from. And here are a few early concepts of Buzz Lightyear, who originally in the script was called Lunar Larry, and you can actually see the LL on the top center drawing there. And he was a little bit more of like a retro spaceman to begin with. And just a few of the rest of the gang. And then Toy Story 2 came along, and we brought some new toys. So those toys were based on the fictional TV show, Woody's Roundup. So artists had to look back at Woody's final design. These are actually from the first Toy Story film, but these are more final versions of Woody. And they wanted to look back at him to help determine a consistent visual style for Jessie, Bullseye, and the Prospector. Because they all needed to believably be from the same era and style of toy as Woody and Woody's Roundup. So here are some earlier concepts exploring kind of a different direction for Jessie. These ones always kind of just feel weird to me, I don't know. Sometimes I see early design concepts for characters, I'm like, oh, okay, like I see where they were going with that, but this one just feels, I don't know, it's not her. Well, that one's pretty cute, but that's my personal opinion. And then here you can see her starting to come together a little bit more into the Jessie that we know, more recognizable Jessie. And then in Toy Story 3, Lotso came onto the scene. And he was actually inspired by this drawing of a little stuffed bear, and this was actually done for the first Toy Story. And it's not actually super uncommon for ideas that weren't quite right for one film to make their way into sequels. And for Toy Story 4, Bo had a major makeover. So here are some classic Bo Peeps from the first Toy Story film. And then some updated concepts for her classic design from Toy Story 4. But here they're kind of exploring a little bit more of her story and her personality, because she didn't really have much in the earlier films until Toy Story 4 came around. But then she evolved into this sort of independent lost toy version of herself. So this is exploring some ways that she could change her costume up into a more adventurous version of her Bo Peep. And I actually think she's got a little bit of Rey from Star Wars going on in here. Maybe a possible inspiration. And so Bo Peep has really had one of the most dramatic redesigns from 1 to 4. Here she is. This is her actual final modeled version of the character from the film in Toy Story. And then her updates for Toy Story 4. But Woody has remained more or less the same. Here's him in 1 and here's him in 4. And really it's more just an update to some of the shadings and the textures, but his design is the same. Okay, and then there's some cases where we are actively trying not to achieve visual consistency with the first Toy Story film. And of course in Lightyear, everything changed. But we still had to look back at past designs, so we knew where to start. And of course Lightyear, it was essential to look back at the Toy Buzz designs. So these are some pages from his original model packet for Toy Story. And then these are some updated Star Command spacesuit designs for the Lightyear film. And then here's the final character poses for comparison. Buzz is still there, but they just really updated the details to make them feel a little bit more realistic and futuristic. And as you heard yesterday, we are now working on Toy Story 5. Woo, yay! So here's Bob Polly. He's back with the Toy Story 5 crew, and he is making regular visits to the archives, and here requesting, looking at artwork from across all of our Toy Story films. I'm like, uh-oh, the marching band's coming through. But of course, I cannot show you what they're requesting because then that would give too much away about the story, but you will learn more eventually. And that is all I have to show you today, but I will leave this parting gift with you. I wanted to put it into the presentation, but it didn't really flow right, but it's just, these are just some early Toy Story logo concept designs and some early ideas for the title. Toy Story was just the working title for the production. It was not intended to be called Toy Story, so they were throwing around all these other ideas, and eventually somebody came back around and said, why don't we just call it Toy Story? And that's where they are. So I have some time for questions. Does anybody have a question out there?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So can you tell when they do Tom Hanks and Tim Allen, thank you, can you see changes in what the characters look like or not?
Do you mean like once they were cast, did they change the character design? I don't know exactly for sure, but I mean, there is a test, an animation test that I know that exists where Woody still has the ventriloquist dummy mouth, where they're using Tom Hanks's voice, but I don't know if they were just thinking of him and then testing it out, or if he was already cast at that time. But I do know that there was a big shift at one point when he was kind of like a not nice guy in the early versions of the film, and he was really jealous of. I mean, he is jealous of Buzz in the final film, but he was like a little bit more mean and vindictive. And I think that having Tom Hanks play that character kind of mellowed him out a little bit, and he's much kinder. So you sort of understand where his frustration is coming from, but you don't fault him for it. He's like so kind. But yeah, I don't know any direct links between the casting and the character design, if that was related at all.
Percentage-wise, what percent of your archives would be physical to digital?
That is really hard to quantify because the digital stuff is like in the millions, so it's, I guess, it's a small percentage of the overall stuff that we keep that's physical, because now almost all of our artists work digital. They're using paint programs, Photoshop. It just makes it a lot easier for the artists to like go to review, hear some notes, make changes to their designs in real time. Whereas if you're working physically and you have a drawing, you kind of have to start over every time you make a change. And the digital paint tools now are just they're so quick and easy for our artists to work with. So there's less and less physical artwork coming into the archive with every production. There are some artists that, because they get to choose whatever medium they like to work with, and if they want to work with a pencil and paper, then that's awesome. But yeah, it happens less and less now just because of the efficiency of the digital tools. But yeah.
Do you have to remind them to save their work so you don't just get the end product?
We try very hard, yes, because one of the things that makes me really sad about the people moving into digital is that the process kind of gets lost in the file. Whereas like with when you're like sketching on paper, you might you start with kind of laying it out, and then you put the piece of paper over here, and then you move on to the next one, and then you work from that, and you sort of there's a visual progression that you can see, whereas in a digital file, they can just hit undo or erase or put another layer over it, or maybe they don't upload the ones that they don't like to, we have like a file sharing system. So yeah, we are losing a little bit of the process, which is sad, but again, I understand they got movies to make, so.
So, as a toy collector myself, do you guys get to like keep all the toys that you guys release and stuff?
We do have a pretty big collection of consumer products, but we're not actively collecting anymore just because we wouldn't have space for all of it. Like, there's just so many consumer products out there. But we do have a collection that somebody had handed off to us from, it's mostly like Toy Story 1 and 2, so, you know, we had more interest in that as like a historical part of our collection, just to try to tell the story of Toy Story. And, you know, it was, when the first film came out, we couldn't get any toy companies to contract with us because they had no idea what Toy Story was. They didn't know who Pixar was. So, like, you know, Mattel, Hasbro, they're like, no, there's no guarantee there. We're not going to contract with you guys because we don't know if we're going to make any money off of this thing. So we ended up working with this Japanese company called Thinkway Toys, and they, you know, as I'm sure you know as a toy collector, and they took a huge chance on us, and they were rewarded for that chance.
Just curious if those stories are true for Toy Story 2 being deleted off the servers by accident. The Toy Stories being deleted off the servers for like the second movie by accident, is that story true or?
Sorry, I couldn't really hear the question. Yeah, come on. Sorry. Yeah, so Toy Story 2 accidentally being deleted off the servers is a true story. Yes, that was a true story. And Galen Sussman is the woman who was digitizing Bo Peep's head. That was her. She was the one who had it on a drive at home and was able to save the film. Yeah, it happened. Do we have more questions? Okay, I'm gonna be around the booth. If you wanna come say hi to me later, ask me questions, I'm around, I'll stick it around, so come say hi, and thanks for coming. You guys were awesome. I was a little nervous, I don't do this a lot, so thank you. Bye, everybody.